If you've ever played Minecraft single player, you've at one point likely felt off. Things seem surprisingly quiet. It's the middle of the day, out in a forest, with leaves, grass, bees, and animals roaming around peacefully. But for a moment, everything seems absent, almost like you're in a vacuum. You break some dirt blocks, and catch a glimpse of a name tag, only to realize it's just dirt particles. As paranoia begins setting in, you take a step and suddenly freeze as you hear something walk behind you. Expecting a creeper, you turn around, and yet there's nothing. You've heard of legends such as Herobrine. Could those stories be real? Suddenly, you hear something walking towards you. Pulling out your sword, your heart skips a beat as you hear the terrifying screech of a cow. It's not a secret that Minecraft can be terrifying at times. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's an important factor to an extent in games. But there's a very fine line between horror that's enjoyable and horror that's not. This is of course subjective. I can't really predict what you like or dislike. However, I believe that the way that Minecraft ends up giving you the chills is a core problem with the game. The Wild update kind of promised to fix this issue, though it failed terribly in this regard. Either way, remember to comment what you think the scariest aspect of Minecraft is after the video. Now, let's get right into this. And remember, don't stare at the moon. Ever since the very beginning, this game has always been kind of eerie. The legend of Herobrine began over 12 years ago, way back in Alpha. There was just something about the intense fog that made it seem like you were being watched. So it was only a matter of time before someone saw an opportunity to create folklore around it. Now, is Herobrine real? Absolutely not. But since the very first image, he's been something people could mistakenly see and then tell others in a panic. Even to this day, I'm sure there's still thousands of people who legitimately believe in the myth. You can easily recreate the alpha feeling by lowering your render distance, or by just having a garbage computer. But there are a lot of other factors that make you perceive the world as more sinister than it really is, even in newer versions. Going back to the legends, while Herobrine is a classic, it's not necessarily aged very well, and Entity 303 is garbage and not scary at all. Personally, I find the Don't Stare at the Moon unfiction to be the best example of what's so terrifying about the game. If you ever get a chance, go up somewhere high and stare at the moon all night. Doesn't it make you feel uneasy? Like it's something you're not supposed to be doing? Speaking of the moon, it seems to have corrupted our world. But no worries, I'll deal with it soon enough. Then we'll get things back to normal. Up to now, I've been extremely vague about what exactly is wrong with the game, so I'll get to the point before my retention drops like a rock. Oh, and speaking of that, did you know that according to my statistics, only 1% of y'all currently watching will end up subscribing to my channel? So be sure to join the elite group of individuals and like the video while you're at it. Okay, enough stalling. The ultimate problem, to me at least, is ambiance. As a brief explanation for those that don't know, ambiance is the atmosphere of a place. Examples can include the wind whistling against leaves, birds singing in the morning, and crickets chirping at night. But it can of course be practically anything else. Ambient sounds is one of the most important aspects about life. Without it, you would quickly become unnerved as your internal bodily functions became deafeningly loud. Although please note that this is not necessarily the same as music. While there is a genre around atmospheric tracks, generally it's separate in that you're not meant to actively listen to or even be pleased by the sounds. They're just considered white noise that you'd expect to hear. Sure enough, if we load into Minecraft, there's almost no ambience besides the occasional pig snorting or chicken clucking. I find the lack of almost any sound incredibly disturbing, and it's what makes the overworld feel lifeless and lonely to so many people. You might be asking, how can this be fixed? Well, the game actually has a place where it's done perfectly, so let's head over there to see how it's different. and also get a break from this dump. The Nether got a total overhaul back in 1.16. It went from being the most boring and pointless dimension to being arguably the most interesting. Now, while all the new biomes are really cool, my favorite aspect about the new Nether is by far the atmosphere created by Lena Raine, who's also made most of the newer music. Nether wastes feel like a massive, vast cavern. You can hear creaking from the ceiling and some unintelligible sounds. There's a constant fear that the tunnels could collapse at any moment and trap you in the depths. Crimson Forest are similar, but feel a bit more lively with what seems to be humid air blowing through the fungus trees. You can also hear what sounds like stretching, which is a bit freaky. Warped Forest are the rarest and most otherworldly. Probably due to the connection to the end, you will occasionally hear chimes, seemingly playing backwards, not to mention the terrifying screech of an Enderman every now and then. Soul Sand Valleys are absolutely desolate, but in the best way. You can practically feel the bone-dry winds coursing through the air, and every now and then you can hear the faint cries from long-lost souls. Considering how often gas spawn here, they also add a lot to this biome. The Basalt Delta is probably my favorite by far though. With all the volcanic ash blowing past you, you can listen to what sounds like the chirps of a Geiger counter. Pair this with the occasional distant explosion or tunnel collapse. This magma-filled hellscape makes you feel like you should get out of there as soon as humanly possible. The Nether is utterly terrifying to be in, yet when you're there you feel so much more immersed in the world. It feels visceral and real. This is one of the best examples for an open world sandbox. But I'll also mention the end is a bit of an exception to the rule we created for the other dimensions. It's meant to feel almost completely empty and void. Yet the 15-minute C418 track that plays while there somehow makes the literal representation of nothing to feel more immersive than the overworld. I'm guessing by this point, you probably understand what I'm trying to say. The place you spend most of your time feels utterly desolate. Besides a few select places, there's very little atmosphere at all, and it starts to become uncanny. You feel like you should hear things, yet it's all quiet. This can cause anxiety and paranoia to begin to set in, and you start hearing and seeing things you normally wouldn't. As someone who prefers single player, I'm often told by other users that they can't play it because of how lonely it feels. And with just a few adjustments, this massive issue that's been with the game since its beginning could be mostly solved in a single update. So that leads to my main point. We desperately need a major update that adds proper atmosphere to the game. And there's even a few mods that we can look at to get an idea of what can be done. Ambient Sounds 5 gives the overworld biome-specific sounds. Mountains are windy, forests have singing birds, and at night, owls cry out. In general, the world feels so much more immersive. There's also the incredibly impressive sound physics mod originally created by Sonic Ether. While probably being a bit too much for vanilla Minecraft, it makes caves sound like genuine caves. Every step you take reverberates off the walls. You can hear mobs echoing throughout the tunnels, and the sound of rushing water will travel throughout an entire cave system. These are just two examples, but I've gotten to the point where I need to use the ambient sounds mod to play normally. Without it, all of my previous issues with the lack of sound is amplified as soon as I turn it off. If I have not drilled it into your head already, it feels like you're being smothered in deafening silence. Maybe that's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but it's just something that's always made me feel so wrong in the 10 years I've played the game. Back when they announced the 1.19 Wild update, the way that they sold it was as a revamp to a ton of the biomes, adding plenty of aesthetic. Sadly, things did not turn out that way. 1.19 really didn't add much at all, but could we see these changes in a future patch? Honestly, as much as I'd love to have an update full of atmospheric Lena Rain ambiance and music, it probably won't happen anytime soon. Now, this is not the only aspect that causes single player to feel lonely. Something I've seen talked about a lot is the unimaginably vast expanse. The effectively infinite procedurally generated world can easily give someone a minor existential crisis, as everything they could possibly do in the game wouldn't even dent the planet as a whole. But I wanted to make a video on something else I haven't really seen anyone else talk about, as it's beginning to really bother me. Almost every open world game, and really most games in general, have some form of ambiance to hide the emptiness you can feel without it. Minecraft, in particular Bedrock, has a lot of problems. However, one of the greatest things about the game is its never-ending development cycle. There's always a chance something will be improved or changed. But remember that the course of updates can be influenced by the community. So feel free to place your own suggestions and feedback on their website. Now, with all this being said, we've got a problem of our own to deal with. I don't have much time, but I'd like to thank all of my patrons, the ones now on screen, as well as my Fox fanatics, Split, Caucasian Crustacean, Trash Never Dies, and Stars. If you'd like to join this list, there will be a link to my Patreon and membership info down in the description. Anyways, we seem to be getting very close now, so I'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.